Why does a dying person stare at the wall and reach for the ceiling? Hi, it's Katie Duncan here with Death Care Coach. I'm a nurse practitioner and an end of life coach, and I'm here to help you prepare and better navigate for the end of life process. In my years as a healthcare provider, as a hospice nurse, and as a nurse practitioner, and as an end of life coach, I have witnessed some really incredible things when people are dying. Things that no one can fully explain, and things that are so common at the end of life that they are now being studied by researchers. Some people refer to these things as simply end of life experiences. Some people refer to them as end of life phenomena. But whatever people call them, one thing remains the same. Researchers do not know why these things occur. And that to me is one of the curious and beautiful and sort of mystical parts of death and dying, that there are things that we just don't understand and that are unknown. Despite the many theories and beliefs that we all may have, when it comes down to it, none of us know for certain what actually happens when we die. And until we die, we won't know. To me, this is just fascinating. In this video, let's talk about 3 of those unknown end-of-life phenomena that commonly occur when someone is nearing the end of life and dying. Number 1, the stare, or what I like to call the death stare. In my experience, as a person begins to near their last weeks of life, sometimes months, but usually days to weeks, you might notice that the person starts to stare at this particular place in the room. Oftentimes, it is directly on the wall in front of them, or it might be in the corner of the room, or it's up on the ceiling somewhere. And this stare, it is usually pretty obvious. It is so intense, like they are intensely staring at this place as if they are seeing someone or something. And yet to us as families, we don't see a thing. This stare is so intense that you might even try to get your person's attention, and maybe they do look away from this spot to look at you for a moment, but they will almost immediately look back at this place in the room, like they're checking to see if whatever they were looking at is still there. The dying person seems just so invested in this place in the room. It's this distant stare as if they're staring through you or like beyond somewhere. I will give you a quick example here. When my granddad was dying, I started to notice that in the weeks before he died, he would stare just under the clock on the wall in front of him. And he did this exact thing too. We would get his attention to talk to him, and he'd look at us briefly, and then immediately he'd go back to staring at this same place. Sometimes he wouldn't even look away from this spot in the room when we were talking to him. He would just respond while continuing to stare at this spot. This stare is so common. I see it in so many of my patients and clients. And I call it the death stare because it typically happens as death is approaching, usually days to weeks, but sometimes months before death. So that is number 1. The dying person has this very distinct stare. Number 2, the reach. Sometimes, along with this stare, the dying person might reach toward whatever they are staring at. They reach out in front of them, or they reach up toward the ceiling or the sky. It's as if they are trying to touch this thing to see if it's real, or to grab someone's hand, or who knows what. I had this one patient who kept reaching up toward the sky, reaching up towards the ceiling. And her daughter was really concerned that her mom kept doing this because she just didn't understand why she kept raising her arms up and moving her hands in the air. She thought her mom must be in pain or some sort of distress. And so one day she finally grabbed her mom's hands and held them down. Her mom, who hadn't really been very verbal, suddenly seemed to get really upset and gave her daughter this really angry look and basically told her daughter to stop and angrily asked what she was doing. She told her daughter that she had been reaching for her parents' hands. And this leads me to number 3, visioning or end-of-life visions. Sometimes the dying person will actually verbalize who or what they are seeing. I can tell you so many stories about patients and clients and even my own family members who experienced this. When my grandmother was dying, she kept telling my aunts that their dad, or her husband and my grandfather, was there with her and was ready to take her with him whenever she was ready. My granddad finally told me that he wasn't alone as he stared at this same spot under the clock in the room. Weeks before, he had also told us that he had seen all of these faces, all of these people. We didn't really understand at the time, but later on it made more sense. One of my patients recently told me that he was seeing all of the kindest people. He didn't know who they were, but he said they were all so loving and kind. He also told me that he had seen Jesus in the corner above all of these kind, loving people. One of my clients, clear as day, told me that he knew he was dying because he had an angel continue to show up at his door every night. He died 2 weeks later. One of my patients told his family that his dead brother had been coming to see him. One of my clients told her family about some kind woman who she'd never met was there to guide her. Turns out this woman was her mother's aunt who this woman had never met or known. When people are able to vocalize what or who they are seeing, the majority of these people have no medication in their system. Their heart, kidneys, and liver were still functioning within normal limits. They didn't have an infection or anything that was changing their blood chemistry. They were mentally clear and totally coherent. They weren't delusional or experiencing a hallucination. And we know this because the presentation of delusions and hallucinations are very different from how people who are dying communicate about and react and respond to these visions. Researchers cannot find any clear or repeatable explanation for these visions, but they are so common when people are dying and near the end of their life. In my experience, families always respond differently to these different phenomena that occur. Some get scared, some get confused, some get concerned, and some do feel some comfort and relief. Here's what I usually tell families. 1, these are incredibly common, and if they do happen, they are a normal part of the dying process. And 2, that in the majority of cases, probably about 80 to 90% of cases, these end-of-life visions and experiences give the dying person a lot of peace and comfort. These experiences often feel so real for them, realer than real, as if there is no way these things can't be real. The people or things they're seeing can't be real. They aren't typically feeling scared. Like I said, the person usually feels supported and put at ease by these visions. So for families, I usually encourage them to be curious, to not disregard them or tell them that they're crazy or that they're just seeing things. Again, this is very real for the dying person. And so instead, ask questions, get curious about who or what they are seeing and how their loved one feels because of them. Usually, families find that their loved one feels safer and feels comforted, and that, in turn, usually puts families at ease as well. As common as these end-of-life experiences are, they don't happen for everyone, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that they're doing something wrong. Every person's dying journey is unique and personal, and that is as it should be. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to leave a comment below. I will do my best to create more videos that answer your questions. If you'd like to hear more from me, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel, where I share more about death and dying and end-of-life care, death doulas, grief, and so much more. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.